Did you know you could make $250 just by building a cool deck? Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back. I'm Supreme Verdicts, practicing attorney by day and a magic strategist by night. After a long day of working on the rule of law, I come home to master the laws of magic. That's right, we're talking about Archidekt's deck building contest for August. We have here in front of me all the mystery booster commander legal cards, and Archidekt is sponsoring a big contest where you can see some prize money here. $250 for first place, $150 for second, $100 for third. For those who create and enter, of course there is bidding and such. I can't find it exactly, but here, I've got it down here. A creative and interesting deck built around one of these mystery booster commanders. I thought this was a very cool idea, and some of these cards are really, really sweet. Have you seen this rule breaker mechanic? This is crazy. Just a straight up rule being broken of commander on a variety of these cards. Some very interesting stuff. I went ahead and I parsed through all of these various, however many cards this is, what is it, 60 different cards. And I kind of broke it down into tiers because I knew I wanted to build a deck for this deck building challenge. I love building decks. I've done a couple of deck bites on this particular channel. I know a lot of people really liked, what was it, my Henzi deck, and a few people enjoyed my, at the time it was Kaikar deck. Now it's being retooled into Sokka as we speak. So I figured we could walk through the process about how do I scientifically go about building a deck? I really want to make sure the land count is right, determining a strategy on the front end, and based on my chess opening theory video, I like to have my first few turns predetermined. I want to help my mulligans be a little smoother, and so we're going to walk through this entire process. I hope you stick around and walk through it with me as I kind of jot through ideas, research some cards, and show you my basic process for outlining how do I want to build the deck from mana value 0 all the way through the ending turns of the game. I broke down, first I pulled all the commanders that really piqued my interest. There's not a ton of them, but there was 12 that I was particularly drawn to, or at least inspired just from first reading to build a deck. I put them into different tiers, where tier 3 kind of felt a little bit linear. Tier 2, I had a few ideas, but either it would be a little bit too difficult, or I wasn't sure if I could pull it all together, or maybe just too many people were doing it. Wit's the Bibliophile? Such a cool card. Was it no max deck size? You know, the Yorion lover in my heart is just aching for this. And then tier 1, find the cards that just I could see so many different directions and knew I would have a blast just really trying to break it down. We have Grizzlegom Herloon Hero, Gusta Ebbastader. Wow, some of these names. Itazura Lingering Wick, Massimo the Magician, and the Muckslicker Gang. Now, I'm sure you already spoiled from the thumbnail here, so we're just going to dive right in. The card that I've decided after like 3 days of deliberating this to go in depth on building is going to be Itazura Lingering Wick. I don't have an Izzet deck. I have never owned an Izzet deck, and I'm kind of excited to get started on trying to build one, especially a card as unique mechanically as this one. This is 2 and a blue-red for a 1/5 legendary creature Spirit. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 3 cards of your library. Stick with me, this is a lot of text. Each opponent secretly chooses a number 0 or greater. Then those numbers are revealed. Choose an opponent with the highest number. Itazura deals that much damage to them, then they may cast a spell from among those cards without paying its mana cost. You put a card from among them that wasn't cast this way into your hand. This card is already doing so many different things. There's a bunch of different directions to go here, as well as this complex ability that I'm still not 100% sure. I keep going back and forth with some of my friends on Discord, trying to decide what happens in the event of a tie here. At the beginning of your upkeep, you're effectively exiling the top 3. All right, so you're impulsing, but it's kind of a worse impulse. You don't get to pick which of those 3 cards you put into your hand. You get to pick what's left. However, as the trade-off, your opponent gets burn damage from Itazura because the Itazura deals the damage to them. Yeah, Itazura deals that much damage to them, and then they get to cast a spell from among those without paying its mana cost. So your opponent's getting free spells, and you're just getting a crappy impulse and a little bit of burn damage. There's more here to it. There's so much more here to it. I have done a little bit of research into this. I have a few strategies in mind, but we're going to kind of walk through. The first thing I like to do when I'm working on a new deck, I mean, I've already got right here with me. I got myself a nice hot cup of tea, some homemade banana bread. I'm ready to just sit down and really work through it. But what I like to do is I just take pen and paper and I kind of walk through the different aspects that I'm thinking about. First things first, spirit. I already know one of my Scryfall searches is going to be for the text spirit. I think there's like a regenerate spirit effect on a land. So I just want to verify that. And I want to see if is there anything else that might come into play here. We have a 1/5. I know that blue has a couple things about power 1 or less. So that might come up. We'll definitely search that. I don't think this will be a commander damage deck at all. And we do want to decide our strategy in terms of winning. It is important to help orient ourselves. But I think we can play around with some of the sub themes at first and then see what really draws us. Power 5, toughness 5 is actually huge. There might be something there in terms of pillow forting. Upkeep triggers will be important. Exile is good to know. There's definitely some cards that have triggers when things exile. Opponent secretly chooses. I love the idea of doing a secretly choose kind of commander. Just the toy maker or whatever that card is with all the different choice games. But here we have it in Is It. The numbers are revealed. Choose an opponent with the highest number. Choose is interesting because it gets around hexproof, which is important if your opponent has that. And then also in the event of a tie, I think, for example, let's say our opponent's clued, because one of the reasons I'm drawn to this, I was an economics major in undergrad before I went to law school, and I really enjoyed my game theory class. I got to take a higher level game theory class. It was incredible. I really enjoy some of that aspect of play, and this strikes to me as the secretly choosing, as well as then as we go through our opponents, the opportunity for collusion. The whole system is a prisoner's dilemma, and for those of you who don't know, Prisoner's Dilemma itself is a printed card, legal in Commander. It's one that I have never been able to slot into any of my red decks, and I think that might be the direction I want to kind of go in terms of my inspiration. That's what made me pick Itazura, was this felt like a home for that card, and maybe we can kind of flesh that out a bit more. Itazura will then deal the damage, so this is non-combat damage that my commander is dealing. Already in Is It, Curiosity, I might want to throw in a Niv Mizzet for that 2-card combo. Then they may cast a spell from among those cards without paying its mana cost. So I'm going to want spells that, well, there's a few directions I can go here. In any case, then I put a card from among those that wasn't cast this way into my hand. A lot of directions to go, and we're going to just dive right into this. I'm a huge fan of OneNote, so I'll often just kind of start a page and then make some considerations. My priorities will often be, I want the deck to be functional. If I can't play the deck, I'm not having fun. I like decks with a unique mechanic, and I want to build around this one in particular. I like to win. I don't want to just kind of dirtle and then fizzle out. Now, how do I win? I haven't decided yet. I don't want this to be just like an alternate win con or combo, but I don't think spell slinging or tokens will really work for this. Maybe there's kind of some pillow forting strategy here. Also, I'm not positive about the curve for this deck, but we're working on this bit by bit. I do have some themes in mind and some cards that I like just off the top of my head that I think might be potentially good, and we'll see how it goes and plays together. Wow. That was a lot of brainstorming. I did have some notes that I kind of took here and there. Just I'd be looking at this card for the last 3 days, so every now and then I'd find something occasionally. I do want to point out a couple things. In terms of themes, my original thought process for Itazura was trying to decide what kind of cards do I think would be okay for my opponents to be getting? What am I okay with them getting? And that's kind of where I came across the group slug, group hug idea, where maybe casting the spell gives some benefit to my opponent, but hurts the other 3 players, or helps the other 3 players in some smaller way. The idea being here that if I cast the spell, great, I get this little incremental benefit, but if my opponent casts it, they get this incremental benefit, but everyone else still gets something and or gets hurt in some way. That way, it kind of minimizes the free spell aspect, and it's just compounding the effects I'm going for in my game plan. I have seen a lot of big spells, flicker, copy ideas, and those are fun. I don't think they're as good for a variety of reasons, and I'll go into that a little bit later. I do want to look into it more, but I kind of like this idea of some goading, some pillow forting, and just, again, playing all these little mini games that end up hurting or helping bit by bit. I do have this little bit of a transmogrify kind of game plan in the back of my noggin that's been stirring. I just think that would be a lot of fun because those kinds of spells don't super benefit your opponent when they get them, but they can be backbreaking if your deck is built for it. But yeah, a few things that I do want to check on. What I'll do is we'll see this actually in a minute. I'll make a deck on Arena and then play against Sparky the bot just to test some card interactions to make sure I understand how the rules actually work. Some different situations about opponent choice. For this, I'm probably going to just kind of makeshift some thought processes and just ask people, hey, how much life would you pay in different situations? Like, what would you actually realistically do? So I can get an idea of how people will interact. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think the big spell flicker idea is super great. I just already, a lot of the people I've talked to would pay a lot less life than I anticipated for even a big spell, but they would pay a similar amount of life for a very small spell, which makes me think just kind of compounding advantage. I do have an interesting stacks plan, maybe making it so that my opponents can't cast the spells, like Vexing Bauble. Can they not cast the spell then? And so then they don't bet any life and they consistently tie, but then they just don't get this effect and I end up with this pretty cool kind of impulse effect on my own, maybe. Ghostly Pilfer is great because it's casting from exile, and a few other things. What was the one I wanted to specifically point out? Oh, timing restriction cards. I think this is a great thing to throw in here. Cards like Illusionist Gambit, which can only be cast, I think, after blockers or maybe right before blockers. Those cards don't work on upkeep because there's a specific point in the game where they can be cast. And usually these cards are worse because of it. But in a deck like this, that symmetry has shifted. It is all of a sudden my opponents won't want to pick that card and they can't even cast it from exile, and so they have to leave it, meaning it's a card that I just freely get to get, as well as other effects like Palantir of Orthanc. Even if I don't get this pretty powerful effect, an opponent of mine who might get it, I can then convince them to gang up on someone who's already taken a decent amount of damage, and therefore we can kind of compound that bullying type effect. Oh, the last one, Expels. Expel's notoriously bad from exile, making it, again, the type of card that my opponent wouldn't necessarily want to be casting. All some good ideas. We've gotten these out, just listing it out. That way I can now break it down by category and by kind of sub-theme and start organizing it inside of Archidekt. From here on out, it was effectively moving all of my notes and all the cards that I could think of into Archidekt. I then went to Scryfall and ran numerous Oracle searches, searching things like Spirit and all the different cards in Izzet that might be associated with that, or choose at random, or each mode must target a different opponent. Cards that have similar text to rules that I was looking for. For example, whenever a player attacks an opponent and the things that might trigger off of that. Most importantly, during step or during phase, trying to find cards with the weird timing restrictions for this direction that I was heading in to some extent. I also looked at different cards that talked about owner's control and returning under the owner's control. I was trying to be as broad as possible, and as I organized into different themes and sub-themes, just keep digging into the holes until I could see as many cards as possible and filter through some of the noise to make the deck. A little bit of a peek behind the curtain here. I have a few mechanics that I'm not quite sure how they interplay or really work together. Also, late night recording session as I continue testing and tweaking the deck. I've got almost the full set of cards in. I want to make sure I understand how this works, so I know what cards to target in some of my Scryfall searches. Effectively, this is a test deck. I like to do this. I'll play against Sparky, the bot. That way I can just kind of draw my cards as I need. It's low stakes. I'm just prolonging the game until I can test the exact interactions I want. We're going to use a Tali Primal Conqueror because when it enters, we exile cards from top till we hit a non-land card and cast from among those cards exiled without paying their mana cost. Very similar to how Itazura allows casting without paying its mana cost. We'll utilize Atali with some flicker effects just so that we can keep repeating this to kind of get through our deck, so that we can test out how does Atali and free cast from exile effects interact with certain types of cards. Specifically, Waterbending and Spree as methods of choose one or more additional costs. Online, based on what I've seen online, I should be able to add these costs after the fact. And so I want to test this out because if so, this makes it a lot stronger in addition to X spells for me to have these types of cards, because they're things my opponents will be less likely to take advantage of. So they're more dead cards for them to draw, which I understand it means they're going to bet less life overall, but ultimately, you know, if they need the card, they'll bet the life. It doesn't matter as much. Similarly, Kicker is an additional cost, but Cyclonic Rift, and here's the really interesting one, overload cost is you may cast it for its overload cost. It is not as an additional cost. And my research has shown me that overload is therefore a replacement cost effect versus an additional cost. And so Atali is also a replacement cost effect where you're not paying the mana cost. So I don't think that if I Atali into the Cyclonic Rift that I get to overload it. I'm pretty sure I just have to cast it at its base, in which case Cyclonic Rift, which is already a really strong card, becomes significantly better, along with all of the other overload cards. And so those might be ones that we take a little bit closer of a look at. The rest of this deck is filled with Brainstorm and fetch lands, so I can get to my 2 mountains I need for Atali, a couple of Serum Visionaries just to draw cards, but have bodies to block with, and then a bunch of little tiny draw card, cantrippy type effects, just to dig through the deck as much as possible so I can get to these spree cards, Cyclonic Rift, brainstorm them and shuffle them back in. Also, I can ramp and find Atali, just so I don't have to do this as many times playing against Sparky. There's nothing in our deck that our opponents can use against us. The clarity of this new rule for the deck really hit me and informed my future decisions. We cut out a lot of the non-basic lands for cards like Price of Progress and Sunspine Links, a lot of the goad mechanic that doesn't really fit well with our bounce sub-theme, as well as we don't want our opponents attacking us as well. We got rid of the top deck manipulation because now that we're going with this deck that's built to be worse, we don't really need to know what's on top. We don't need to fix our draw because all the cards are going to be bad. We're cutting out the big creatures, the Niv Mizzets, some of the card draw creatures, because we don't need them anymore. We don't want our opponent to have it even for one turn. We're getting rid of some of our damage dealers. We're getting rid of anything that doesn't just bounce creatures, because we don't want our opponents to be able to use it against us. All of our wheel payoffs are being taken away, except for a couple of the cheaper ones that grant additional payoffs in the deck. And some of the political cards that don't particularly lean in the direction of if our opponent uses it, it still provides us a benefit, get cut as well. In general, the deck itself is starting to form much more clearly as we focus on allowing our opponents to help push us towards our win condition, with the majority of the cards in the deck being a variety of bounce spells and being a variety of wheel effects, with some counter spells thrown in there to help protect us. At the height of this deck, we were at over 360 something cards, but slowly but surely we're whittling it away as we get further and further clarity about the couple of sub-themes that we want and aren't inundated with a variety of cards that either don't help us directly or don't hinder our other opponents directly. We are cutting a variety of the removal that doesn't help just because we don't want to accidentally hit our other creatures. And bit by bit, the deck is starting to take form as we use a hypogeometric calculator to figure out exactly how much of each theme we need. Itazura Lingering Wick is a student of game theory. In the prisoner's dilemma, the rational choice and the Nash equilibrium is to defect, even though cooperation produces a better outcome for everyone. Our opponents know that we know that they know this, and they may decide to cooperate against our life-bidding shenanigans. What they don't know is that the whole deck is rigged. The premise is simple. There is nothing in this deck that our opponents can use against us. That's right. Despite cutting an hour of footage, because some of these cuts took way too long, going from over 360 something cards down to the final deck list, we've done it. We have finished crafting Itazura Lingering Wick, and it has taken on a different view than what I originally had, but I like this deck. I like this deck a lot. Specifically, Itazura, our 4-mana commander, as you now well know, wants our opponents to be casting spells, but we've taken into account that they might bet, at minimum, 0 life. They all might bet 0 life. So the entire deck is built around mitigating this worst case scenario that way, and still built to win. That way, if they bet any amount of life, we end up ahead. That way, despite whatever spell they choose to cast, we end up ahead. That's right, Itazura, the plan is mulligan till you have a hand with 2 lands and a ramp piece. Hopefully you'll draw your 3rd land, but it's okay, worst case scenario. But you want a couple of lands to start off and a little bit of ramp, because we want to get Itazura out on turn 3 if possible. From that point on, you're going to be effectively drawing 2 cards per turn. At upkeep, you will get to keep one of the 2 cards that your opponents choose not to cast. If they choose not to cast all of them, I believe you get to pick any of the 3. Right? If they may cast a spell, you put a card from among them that wasn't cast this way. So if they decide not to cast it so it stays in exile, you still can recover it. At this point, you are relying to some extent on your opponents to be able to cast your card draw spells for you, or cast your removal spells for you, knowing and understanding that most of the removal spells cannot actually affect you. Almost every single removal spell is a bounce spell and or a counter spell. A counter spell which they can't cast on upkeep because there's nothing to counter. And a bounce spell which just lets us replay our Itazura for our 4 mana with our mana rocks. The variety of card draw spells all end up allowing us to draw cards even when our opponents end up casting them, with various incentives for them to cast it. And our burn spells and damage dealing spells all hurt our opponents as well. Every card in this deck will either benefit us, no matter who casts it, or will detriment at least one other opponent, no matter who casts it. That's the whole idea. Even our creatures have a variety of advantages within the deck. Alexios cannot attack its owner. That's right. No matter who casts it, Alexios cannot attack you. It will just go around hurting everyone else. We have Portal Mage here, which flashes in and can change attackers, but only during the declare attackers step. Otherwise, it's a 3-mana 2/2 that opponent casts on upkeep. However, when we then bounce it later on, we have access to these effects all over again. The deck runs a tight land suite with focusing as much as we can on basic lands while still trying to fix for this color-intensive deck. Look at that Insurrection. That way we don't get hurt by some of our burn spells that rely on those types of effects, such as Price of Progress. And lastly, we seek to close out the game with, once everyone's life total has gone down enough, with an Insurrection, if we haven't seen a mass bounce in a while, or a Crackle with power, once our opponents get low enough. Worst case scenario, we can overload Mizzix's Mastery, but they can't, because overload is an alternative cost. However, we can overload Mizzix's Mastery such that we can then get access to some of these removal spells, burn spells, and theft spells all over again. This deck was an absolute blast to build. It took a lot more work than I thought it would, but I'm glad that I did it. It was a fun experience, and I hope you liked it too. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this at all. Comment if you want me to post the full video with all the unedited footage, my thoughts card by card going through it, and share this with a friend. We've had some really thoughtful and engaging comments on the last couple of videos, and I've really enjoyed kind of developing a back and forth with some of you. I'd love to hear more. I'd love to know more. Please let me know. And I know it's still far off, but if you're going to be at MagicCon Atlanta this upcoming November, shout out in the comments. I'm going to be there too. Maybe we can get together, grab a game. Unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, but however, there is more strategy to analyze, more games to play, and unfortunately, more work to do. I'm Supreme Verdicts. Have a wonderful rest of your day.